feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hit you with a win. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such eagle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Chasing the Pennant podcast. I'm your host tonight, Rob. Tonight, I'm joined by Sean. How's it going, Sean?
Pretty good. Pretty excited to be back on the pod after a pretty long hiatus. I was on vacation for a while, and there's a whole lot of baseball news I haven't really been keeping up with, so I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah, welcome back, man. How'd the vacation go?
It was pretty good. It actually felt a lot longer than it was. It was only about a week, but it felt long, which is kind of rare for week-long vacations. So I was pretty content with it.
That's good to hear, man. It's always nice to get away and kind of de-stress a little bit on those vacations, especially during a time like this. So we're also joined tonight by Andrew. Andrew, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. A little sore. I joined a spin class down here to kind of continue my quarantine weight loss. So trying to get in a little bit better shape. So that spin class, I'm about 2 weeks in now. So it's definitely getting a little better, but a little sore from that.
Good for you, man. Good for you. I would never even think about joining a spin class, but that's good stuff. You're really dedicated to that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get better, so it's been going well, thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, we're joined by Biscuit. Biscuit, how's it going?
Rob, the sun has been coming out, the birds have been chirping. Not only do we have baseball coming, we now have a schedule. So I'm hype. I'm ready to go. However, I think it's going to be a very bumpy ride, but all things considered, I'm very good.
Hey, Biscuit, I got good news for you. If we're going to have a baseball season, that means it is possible for the New York Mets to lose games this summer.
Oh, gosh, and we wouldn't want it any other way now, would we?
All right, well, anyway, speaking of that, the Phillies' 2020 abbreviated 60-game schedule has been released. And just to sum it up, they start off with a home series against the Miami Marlins. I was about to call them the Florida Marlins, even though that changed about, 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a minute now.
Yeah, so they got the 3 at home against the Marlins, who always kick their ass. So we'll see how that goes. They got a 4-game home and home with the Yankees. 2 here, 2 up at Yankee Stadium, 3 up at Toronto, 3 down in Miami. And then they come home for 10 games. It's 4 against Atlanta, 3 against the Baltimore Orioles, 3 against the Mets. Back on the road, 2 at Boston, 3 at Atlanta, 3 at the Nationals. And then 3 at home against the Braves, 4 at home against the Nationals, 4 on the road against the Mets, 2 at home against the Red Sox, 4 on the road against the Marlins. And then they're home for 3 each against the Mets and Blue Jays before closing the season with 3 each at the Nationals and at the Tampa Bay Rays. And guys, and Sean, I'll start with you. This is a murderer's row schedule. This is a really tough schedule. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way for this Phillies team. This season, and as we have talked about on previous podcasts, I assume this season's going to have an asterisk no matter what. So I don't think that no matter who wins the World Series this year, they're going to have an asterisk. And, if the Phillies end up losing, 50 out of their 60 games, it's not going to mean anything, especially if some of the stars that we think are going to sit out are going to sit out. I think that, if the Phillies end up surprising people, they do. If they don't, it's whatever. It's a 60-game season. It's not to be taken as serious as some other seasons.
Yeah, I could see why you would have that train of thought. I mean, a lot of people, fans especially, people who I've talked to, they just feel like this whole thing is a joke. They just feel like this whole thing it's 102 games less than what we're usually having. It feels like we're about to have a season full of exhibition games, more or less. The fact that there won't be any fans in the stands, and the fact that the schedule's all jacked up and they're playing American League teams all the time, and yada yada yada. It's a really weird thing that we've got going on here. And so I'm kind of in the same boat as you, that I don't know how seriously people are going to take this.
Right, and for
But
that
anyway,
reason, it almost feels
we'll move on.
feels like it's more exciting that they're playing these like more difficult teams, because it's like they're given more of a challenge. They're given more of an like an experimental. How are they going to stand up against these teams that are going to dominate them for a couple of years? Like, are they going to stand up to them, or are they going to kind of like falter in front of them? And it makes it more exciting. It's like if the season's already going to kind of be looked at as exhibition games, then play the more difficult teams.
It does. It makes everything a little bit more of a wild card too. I mean, how often do you get to play 2 series against the Yankees, 2 series against the Red Sox? You get to go down to Tampa, and then at the same time you have to play tough teams within their own division, like the Braves and Nationals and the Mets.
Right.
So it's gonna be really interesting to watch. Biscuit, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, from the get-go, once it was really announced how the schedule will be somewhat formatted with, the Phillies playing the entire National League East for 40 games and then playing the American League for another 20, I didn't have to see a schedule to know that this was going to suck. And it really, it's relentless. Just looking over it, the month of August alone, they start off, I believe, with like the Blue Jays and Marlins, and I think they maybe play the Orioles once. But other than that, you get a full month almost of Nationals, Red Sox, Mets, and Braves. That just sounds like agony to me. And, this team wasn't really a lock when we were expecting to have a, typical 162 game season. This team wasn't a postseason lock then. And I think now you're throwing them into this type of situation where, as you guys mentioned, it's going to be insanely competitive. 8 out of the 10 teams in this like mega division, if you want to call it that, are at least going to try to compete, other than the Marlins and the Orioles. So it's not going to be fun. Or if I'm the optimist in me, it could be very fun and exciting. And just to, counter you, Sean, for that reason alone, I don't think teams are going to punt, just because I think this opens up a window of opportunity for teams that may have not have made the playoffs in a 162 game format to kind of go give it a shot. Like take the Phillies, for example, a team that's been really hot in the first half, looked like they were set for postseason both in 2018 and even 2019. It looked like they could come around. However, 2 second half collapses, a team like that in a sprint marathon type season, they might not have to experience that collapse, and that could happen to other teams that might be a little bit more of a reach to make the playoffs. That could happen to them as well. But for the Phillies specifically, it's not looking pretty, to say the least.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about that beginning of August where they start off with the Blue Jays, but then it gets really tough after that because they have a 29-game stretch where 26 out of those 29 games are against the Braves, Mets, Red Sox, and Nationals. And the only 3 in that stretch that are against not against one of those teams is 3 at home against the Orioles, who, by the way, I'm really disappointed that out of all the AL East teams, we only get to play the Orioles once, or one series, because that's the one team that they probably can beat up on.
No, I agree with that. And that was when I saw this. You get the Orioles and Rays 3 times. So I guess we kind of lucked out with the Rays there, only facing them once. But no, yeah, it's a tough draw when you got to face the Yankees and Red Sox twice. And even the Blue Jays, when you face them twice, and I think they're kind of under the radar on a lot of people's teams on this year. But I like what the Blue Jays are doing, and I think they're going to be a little better than people are expecting, especially in the shortened season, which we can get into later. But I think the shortened season definitely helps the Blue Jays.
We actually play the Blue Jays we play them 6 games. We play 3 away and 3 home. So that's one of the guys. One of the
that's right. The way at the beginning.
Right. We're going to see them as much as another one of our division rivals.
Yeah, it's actually the last home series of the season is 3 games with the Blue Jays. So yeah, that's a good point, because the other 2 teams, the Yankees and the Red Sox, we play them twice each, but each series is only 2 games. So we only played them 4 games total, whereas we played against Toronto 6 times. Kind of wish we could trade one of those series with a series against the Orioles.
Right.
As we said, it's going to be a very interesting schedule, something we've never seen before. Guys, and Andrew, I'll start with you this time. Is there any particular series, or maybe 1 or 2 series, out of the Phillies schedule that is particularly interesting to you, that you would say is maybe not must-watch TV, but more must-watch TV than any other series out there?
I would say, for me personally, as you guys mentioned, that stretch after Baltimore will probably make or break the season. I mean, with obviously all the tough teams being there. And I think, obviously all the division games will be important. So I think for me, the series that will really stick out to me will be the Blue Jays series at home, because late in the year it's going to be a 3-game series, and that's one, again, a lot of people aren't high on the Blue Jays, but I think they can kind of creep up on some teams this year, and I think that could be a series that kind of makes or breaks your season there with kind of 3 games. I think that's one you're going to have to take advantage of at home and at least win the series. And like you said, Rob, that's the last home series, and before that stretch, after that series, you get the Nationals and the Rays on the road, which obviously will be far from easy. So I think one that people probably won't expect to be must-watch TV would be that Blue Jay series, especially with some of the moves they made getting Ryu from the Dodgers. I think that would be some fun pitching matchups if he kind of gets matched up with Nola or Wheeler down the stretch. That would be an interesting pitching matchup. Then obviously with some of the young bats they have, could also turn into a scoring fest. So I think that late home series against the Blue Jays could be a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, with all the young talent that Toronto has, it's always going to be fun to watch them. That team can mash. So, yes, absolutely, it will be a fun series to watch. And plus, Phillies Blue Jays always kind of has that little thing to it because of the '93 World Series, and there's a little bit of a rivalry going on there. So it's always fun to watch when they play the Blue Jays. But I think this will be a good series to watch. Biscuit, what about you? Is there any series in particular that stands out to you here?
Well, that last stretch of 6 games when the Phillies face the Nationals and Washington, and then they go down to Tampa to face the Rays. I think given how the season's, formatted, it's going to be a close race to the finish line. And you have, 2 teams that are most likely going to be in the playoff push, that you have 6 must-win games now that could really make for some entertaining baseball. And I think you're going to see, Wheeler-Strasburg matchups, Scherzer-Nola, Snell and Nola with the Rays. Maybe you're going to see some pretty neat matchups, and it's going to make some late-season drama that we'd really see going, in a regular season going down towards the end of the final playoff run. But, you're going to see it now in a very quick 60-game format. And I just think those matchups could be a really, really, I would say, must-see baseball, because I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, it's 2 very, very tough teams, the Nationals and the Rays. And the interesting thing about that Rays series is that for once they'll have just as many people in the stands as every other team in baseball.
You two are Rays so dirty, Rob. Well, that's why they're so hot. That's why they're such a good team, because they got no fans. Can't get cooled down.
Exactly. Well, maybe that's got something to do with it. Anyway, Sean, any series that stands out to you amongst the series that the Phillies have here?
Well, one of the big ones that stands out for me, and I'm going to go a different route from the other 2 guys, and I'm going to say that the Atlanta series at the end of August is one of the most important of the entire season for the Phillies. So there'll be 31 games in at this point, just past the halfway point of the season. They have 3 games against Atlanta at home after a tough 3-game series away at Washington, and that's 4 days away from the trade deadline, which this season is going to be right at the end of August. It's going to be August 31st. So I think that those 3 games against Atlanta at home are going to be huge in determining whether or not the Phillies should be buyers or sellers at the deadline. They have a lot of pieces that they can move, and they have a lot of pieces that they could easily trade away to get a big guy if they want to go ahead and buy in this, 60-game season. That Atlanta series against one of your biggest division rivals at home at the end of August, halfway through the season, that's huge, and I think the Phillies really need to concentrate on that.
And it's also a really important series too because it's sandwiched right in between two series against the Nationals.
Right.
So
It's huge.
Yeah, it's that's right in the middle of that murderer's row the Phillies have, pretty much during the month of August there. So yeah, and you know what? When the Braves come to Philadelphia, the Phillies actually handle them pretty well. It's down in Atlanta where they struggle. So the fact that series is up at Citizens Bank Park, not that home field advantage is going to mean a whole lot without fans in the stands this year, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm sure it'll make a difference one way or another. You're playing in your home ballpark, even if there's no fans. You want to protect that one way or another, and I think that's going to play a huge part in the season.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I'm sure it'll play a huge part in the season for all teams.
I was just going to say, I think it's a big for the Phillies in the sense of, you mentioned they go down to Atlanta and struggle. I think the no fans will help the Phillies in that sense because, I mean, whether you like it or not, I feel like the tomahawk, the chop or whatever, that really affects the Phillies. I think that really gets to them. We see a lot, and I think that's one of the places Hector Neris always struggles a lot too as well. So I think without the fans, I think that really helps the Phillies in that sense when they go down to Atlanta.
Yeah, we'll certainly see about that. As far as I go, one series that stands out to me is actually two series, but because of the fact that they're played back-to-back, it's kind of a home and home. I'm going to talk about it as if it's one series, and that's the 4 games against the Yankees to open up the season right after they play against the Marlins. In a 60-game season, there's nothing more important than getting off to a hot start. And if you can get off to a hot start by beating a team as good as the Yankees in 4 games, or, at least taking 3 out of 4 there, that'll go a long way, not just to being that good start in a short season that you need, but also to building the team's confidence going forward. Because after that, they have a series against the Blue Jays, who are a good team, but a beatable team. And then they have 3 games against the Marlins, who are a team that they should beat. So you're talking, if they do well against the Yankees, they could get off to a very hot start to the season, which leading into that tough stretch of games could be really, really important for them. So I'm going to go with those 4 games against the Yankees for the series, or should I say 2 series that stand out to me.
Yeah, I think that's like you said, it's going to be important to get off the hot start. So, especially with those next few games, and if you can go out and battle like that, especially with the roster that the Yankees have, they add Garrett Cole, so that'd be interesting what he can do and everything with that roster there. Create some interesting pitching matchups as well, and then obviously a lot of power on both teams, and then you get the Harper versus Judge kind of slugfest, hopefully. So a lot of good storylines in there as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
My bad, Rob.
Go ahead.
If the Phillies beat or win all 4 games against the Yankees, I'm just going to go disclaimer right now. I would be completely all in like that, and I would think they're World Series champions this year. I'm just putting that out there now because and as you said, Rob, it's a really good test to see just like how much they're capable of handling right off the bat. Like, I think last year we were kind of, I don't know if dupe's the right word, but for 2 months it looked like this team was going to kind of be able to put its money where its mouth was and kind of keep up with everything and all the other teams in the division and in the league, but they kind of just fell flat on their faces. I think facing a team and another team I would say would be like the Dodgers, that are just kind of like a complete, true dominant team that just have such a, elite, not just lineup, but a rotation as well, and just a very, very depth bullpen. If they somehow pull that off, Rob, I'd be all in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be really excited about that. I would personally take it with a grain of salt. I don't really buy into the teams until they're at least halfway into the season. They're still proving that they're playing well. But I think, that good start would pique the fan interest. It'll get the fans into it. TV ratings would go up, which is always a good thing, especially in a year like this where you're relying on that instead of attendance. So that's a big thing right there. One thing, though, and Sean, you tweeted about it the other day, is the morbid thought, the morbid idea of Garrett Cole being matched up against either Vince Velasquez or Nick Pivetta, and I get sick to my stomach even thinking about that.
So one thing I actually just looked up just to make sure I was correct, and I actually wasn't. The Yankees end up playing the Phillies, like you said, the fourth through seventh game of the season. Sorry, that's actually for each team, and that's actually makes that sixth start line up for Garrett Cole, and it should have lined up for Pivetta if it was right, because the Yankees play on opening day, quote unquote, which is the 23rd. They're one of two games that day. The Phillies don't play that day. They start their season the next day. So it should have lined up where Garrett Cole should have taken on Pivetta, but it actually looks like it's lining up to where that should have been the number one starter versus number one starter, which is Cole versus Nola. But the way I'm looking at this is, especially with the Tanaka news that came out, and anybody that didn't see the Tanaka video, during some live BP, he was pitching to, I believe it was Stanton, Giancarlo Stanton, and he took a line drive right off the head and got a concussion. And given the injury history of some of the Yankee starters as it is, I have a feeling that Aaron Boone's going to line it up so that they're going to give Garrett Cole the start against, they're going to give him the normal 5 days rest. They're not going to go to the fifth starter after the first series. They're going to give the off day to him, and they're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back to 1, so that Garrett Cole is going to end up facing the Phillies' 5 starter, which as of right now, it's looking to be either Vince Velasquez or Nick Pivetta. And that's a game where, as Rob also said on Twitter, I would take the Yankees in, whatever their minus is. I would put all my money on them, because Garrett Cole versus this Phillies lineup, as much as I love them, I don't give them a chance.
Yeah, I think I said minus 20. I think the Yankees would be 20-run favorites, and I'd still take them. We're looking at like a 24-3 game or something like that.
Oh God.
Probably not really. It won't be that bad, but it'll be pretty bad. Anyway, now that we're talking about how bad the Phillies would look against Garrett Cole, I think at least two of us think that they actually might end up looking pretty good as a whole throughout the season. We're going to get into our record predictions right now. And we'll start off this time with Sean. Sean, how do you feel about the 60-game season as a whole and the amount of success that the Phillies could potentially have?
Well, unlike a normal football schedule, like for the Eagles, I would go through every game and say, this is a win, this is a loss, and give my prediction for, an overall record. I haven't done that with the entire 60-game schedule of the Phillies, but I think this is easily, not easily, but I think they could potentially end up pulling off 35 to 36 wins, which in a shortened season like this with only 60 games, that might just be enough to earn them, I don't think they'll get the division at 35 or 36 wins, but I think they could reach out for the first wildcard spot. So I give them that leeway to where I think they will end up with a positive season, especially with guys like Girardi and Price leading this team. I think they definitely have the potential and the tools to have a positive record.
Yeah, I tend to like that take. I'll get into that a little bit later. But Andrew, what about you? How do you feel about this?
So when I started looking at the schedule, and I didn't go through each game, but I kind of went to each series, and it was like, okay, they play the Yankees this amount of times and whoever else that many times. I kind of just wrote a number to figure out how many games I think they'd win in the series rather than go each game by game. And when it was all said and done, I came out to even 30-30 record. And that was before I kind of went and looked at some of the over-unders. So I went to check that to see if I was kind of high or low compared to what the lines were. The Phillies were set at 31.5. So I'm kind of right along there, but so I guess I'm taking the under in terms of the prediction mark there in the sense of that. But I just think this schedule is really difficult. I don't think the Phillies did enough in the offseason to kind of get over that 500 kind of set tone yet, especially with the schedule. So I'm going to go an even 30-30 record.
Okay. Biscuit, what about you?
I was doing my show notes before we all got on tonight, and I wrote down a optimistic prediction and a pessimistic prediction. And I even labeled the two, like optimistic one side, pessimistic, and I wrote like little pros and cons for each one. So that's what took up most of my evening. I'm going to give my pessimistic number 25-35. I don't think they're still just an unproven team that was not a lock to make the postseason to begin with. And now they're in, as I mentioned earlier, this division with 8 out of the 10 teams trying to vie for playoff spots. It's just going to be really difficult. And I don't see a situation unless things really, really break the Phillies' way, which could happen, and I'm hoping it does. But, let's be real, that hasn't happened for nearly a decade now, things going the Phillies' way. So, as of right now, with the product I'm looking at, I just find it very hard to be optimistic.
Yeah, in fact, the thing is, breaking the Phillies' way has only happened twice in 135 years, I think it is.
That's brutal.
It is brutal.
Wow.
It really is brutal. Oh, man. So you said you had both a pessimistic and an optimistic one. What's your optimistic number?
Yeah, and you know what? And that's my thing. I was really pessimistic, but then I said, screw it. Things could break their way. And my optimistic prediction, it might not sound anything too sexy, but I don't think, teams are going to need to pull off anything too sexy to sneak into at least one of the wild card spots. And I said they might break off 33-27. So I think that would be 6 games over 500. I think that would be good enough for a first or a second wild card spot. And that's, like I said, with all things kind of breaking their way, meaning the rotation holds their own, the bullpen holds their own. I don't think the lineup's going to be anything too much to worry about. We already kind of talked about how I think, the new rules and the DH will really benefit them. I just think it comes down to that bullpen and that rotation. And if they're able to kind of hold their own and make it through with, all of the ups and downs that we could expect from a Phillies pitching staff, 33-27, 6 games over 500, I think that would be enough to get it done. And the reason I kind of took a step back and said, you know what, be a little more optimistic. The team did severely underperform last year in all facets, from the lineup to rotation to, our people on the bench to our people in our bullpen. Everyone kind of just took a collective step back, and it never really looked like anyone was on the same page. Obviously, it's going to be different just because of how, the season's going to play out with 60 games. But I think with the right management now and kind of more solidified pieces in the lineup and in the rotation as well, I think the team could take a step forward. And on paper, that team last year was a team that everyone expected to make the playoffs. So if they can take that team forward, it's possible. There is a path for the Phillies to get to the postseason.
All right, so judging by your worst case scenario of 25 and 35, and your best case scenario of 33 and 27, I'm just going to do a little bit of math here. Do you think it would be fair to put your, I guess, general assessment of the team at around 29 and 31, somewhere in the middle there?
Yeah, I think a 500 team is exactly what I kind of see them as right now, just how they kind of been the last 2 years in general. I believe it was you, Andrew, who mentioned that the team didn't do enough in the offseason. And I think that's true to an extent. You could always do more to make your team better. But I think, given the splashy offseason they had a year ago where they literally added, 4 new pieces to the lineup. Last year they got Zach Wheeler, who should be a very solid number 2 pitcher, and getting Didi. I think he's going to be a great addition to clubhouse culture and the lineup as well. I think they had the pieces last year to do it, and they took the step back. I think they only added. Plus, you have guys like Bohm and Spencer Howard coming as well, who should be contributing to this team. So that's really 4 new players that could really step up. So, like I said, I could just see it following. I'm right in the middle right there, like I said, around 500. And I could see the dominoes falling one way or they could fall the other. And I don't think I'm going to know until the season starts which way I'm feeling.
I think a lot of people are in the same boat. I'm going to take a little bit of a more positive spin, kind of like Sean did. I'm going to say that they finish pretty well above 500. I'm going to go with a record of 34 and 26. That's eight games above 500. not going to be good enough to win the division. I think you could see either the Braves or the Nationals pushing 40 wins. But I think it should be good enough to, at the very least, contend for that second wild card spot, if not get the second wild card spot. I think that, like you alluded to, Biscuit, last year they had the talent there. There were some things that just didn't break their way. They had some injuries. They didn't put it all together when they needed to. Kind of fell apart down the stretch. I think that this year they've got a better manager. They've got a much, much, much better pitching coach, which we don't talk enough about, by the way. The fact that we upgraded from bum-ass Chris Young to Brian Price, that's a big deal. And I think people don't talk about that enough. So that's going to be a big factor right there. And, yeah, I think that 60 games, you have less risk of guys going down with injury, aside from the whole coronavirus thing, which is obviously a very real threat. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But not considering that, I think 60 games, you have less risk of a physical injury taking place. And I think that obviously bodes to the Phillies' advantage. I think they'll be able to use that to put together a more complete season than they have the past 2 years and finish a few games above 500. All right, so speaking of the coronavirus effect, and it has affected the Phillies, we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's had enough of an effect to where we're actually seeing some players decide that they don't want to play this year. Now, Ian Desmond was a combination of things, but the coronavirus and the protests that are going on, he wanted to kind of focus his energy a little bit more on that, which we can respect. Ryan Zimmerman decides he's not going to play this year. And David Price, probably the biggest name, or the most valuable player, I guess I should say, who has decided to sit out this season. And guys, and Andrew, I'll start with you. Who do you think is the one player who, by not playing this year, is going to have the biggest negative impact on his team?
I think the reason why I won't pick Price is because I think the Dodgers are so well set up to overcome that loss with how deep they can go. I believe they were planning on having Ross Stripling go to the bullpen, so he'll probably just start now. And I mean, don't get me wrong, David Price is probably better than he is, but I think the way they can just add that next guy up right there is just shows how much depth they have. So I think that's why I don't think it will be as negative for the Dodgers as it seems. I'm going to actually go with a more recent one in a Brave, because I think it might maybe leave a hole in their lineup, and that's Nick Markakis. I think he's been a phenomenal contact hitter. He gets on base a lot. He's known for always not doesn't have the biggest power numbers, but he always has a high average, high on base percentage, and is always reliable and getting on, and it's a true veteran leader as well. So I think with them adding the DH this year, that might hurt the Braves a significant amount. So I'm going to go with, I think Nick Markakis might have a pretty big impact in sitting out, especially with him making the All-Star game recently too. So I think that's a big loss for them, and it'll be interesting to see where they overcome it. I know they signed Ozuna, but he'll fill that probably the outfield spot and takes him away from the DH. So again, I think it just leaves a hole in that lineup, and it helps the Phillies. So.
Yeah, actually, I'll be completely honest. I forgot about the fact that Markakis announced that he's not playing, which is a big thing as a Phillies fan because you mentioned he doesn't have great power, but it seems like he does have great power every time he plays against the Phillies.
Oh my god!
Right? all of his at least half his home runs, it seems like a year comes against the Phillies.
Yeah, it really does. It's a problem that the Phillies will be happy to avoid this year. Markakis a very valid answer, though. I respect it. Like I said, I completely forgot that he's not playing, but he is a very important player. He's a big piece of that Braves lineup that scored a lot of runs last year, so we'll see how that affects them. Biscuit, what about you? Who do you think is the one important guy who's going to be missed by his team?
I'm going to go with David Price. Obviously, the biggest name to announce that he's not playing and opting out so far. I don't think he'll be the only one. I think you're going to see some other big names do it too, but he's been the biggest thus far. And let's be real. The Dodgers have been on this World Series quest now for what feels like forever since, me dating back to when I really became a baseball fan, I always remember the Dodgers as this dominant team, and I feel like that just hasn't changed for almost nearly a decade at this point. This year, even though they're only playing 60 games, like, let's be real, the Dodgers are going to be in it, and even without Price, they're going to be in it. But like, it's, now you have, it's just, I don't know, like, you have a guy who's so good, and like, I think he was really someone that made them like just over the top. Like, I would have thought they were winning the World Series this year. I thought they were going to win the World Series this year, and when we were going to play a regular season. And I thought, just the additions of Mookie and David Price just really put this team on a whole new level of good that I just thought it was going to be something in the likes of something we've never seen before. And now that's changed that they don't have Price. And, that team, they're not getting any younger. The clock's ticking. If there's a situation where they fall short or don't make it to the World Series, you got to sit there and wonder, like, how much David Price, a guy who's been, fairly reliable. I know he's kind of, prone to injury, but you got to wonder how much of an impact he could have made if he decided to play. And of course, it's his decision and I respect him for it. Like, I wish him all the happiness in the world with that choice. But you got to wonder if they don't make it, how much of a difference he could make in the long run.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up at the end there about the long run, because he's getting up there in age. He's in his mid-30s now. How much mileage does he have left in that arm? I mean, on one hand, you could argue that he's saving himself for a year by not pitching, but when he comes back next year, he's going to be another year older, and the arm's probably not going to be any better than it is right now. So he's just, if he had any time left in the prime of his career, he's basically doing away with a third of a season of it. So it's a big loss for the Dodgers, but it's also kind of, it might have an impact on the end of his career as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, he's certainly getting up there in age. He hasn't been particularly healthy over the last couple seasons. I know it's been a little bit, I think, since he's pitched 200 full innings in a season. So you're right, he's not getting any younger. It's truly, he was a player I didn't really expect to see opt out. He was kind of the last names I would consider, just because, that team feels so in the hunt for the playoffs that, like, everyone on that team just has that mindset, like, this is what we got to do. But obviously that wasn't the case. So it's not only a loss for the Dodgers, it's a loss for baseball, because, he was such a talented player, and I was looking forward to seeing him in the National League this year.
Yeah, he is when he's on his game, he is a very fun pitcher to watch, and it's a shame that we won't be able to see him this season. Sean, what about you? Do you have any guy of those three or anyone else who you think could have a big impact by not playing this season?
I'm going to mind the gap between both of yours. I'm going to take a starting pitcher that's a veteran that, might have impacted the game in a way, off the field instead of on, and a Brave that we forgot about, and that's Felix Hernandez, somebody that, hasn't really been in the news, but he was somebody that opted out, a couple days ago on, I think it was Twitter, and he said he wasn't going to play this season because of COVID. And in my eyes, when he first signed with the Braves, it didn't have the same impact that Cole Hamels did when he signed with the Braves, where you knew Cole Hamels was signing to start for the Braves. Felix Hernandez, I believe it was a minor league deal he signed, but you knew that he was going to end up being the team's fourth or fifth arm when the season came around. And it was kind of scary because even though he is a veteran arm that maybe isn't the same that he once was, he's most likely a Hall of Fame pitcher. I mean, that's a topic for another time, but he's an all-star pitcher, and you know his track record. He's somebody that scared me, especially an arm that's going to face the Phillies a multiple amount of times in the season, and especially what he's going to do for all the starting pitching prospects that the Braves have. It was a scary thought, and while I'm not saying that he's probably not going to help out those arms in some kind of way, not having him there is going to hurt the Braves a lot, and I think it's more than just the on-field results.
Yeah, it's an interesting take there. Personally, I'm not big on what Felix Hernandez could have done for Atlanta. I think we saw a pretty significant drop-off from him in the last few years up in Seattle. You can blame part of that on the fact that he's playing for the Mariners and they suck, and maybe he just had no passion to perform well up there, but I mean, he was a guy who relied on velocity. lost his velocity. Breaking pitches were decent, but not effective enough to overcome the lack of velocity they had in the last couple of years. And as it happened, he got hit around a good bit. So, I mean, it is a big loss for the Braves, the fact that they're losing a back end of the rotation guy. But it's not the same Felix Hernandez of the past. And
Well, that's why I kind of went with it's more of the off-field stuff. He's almost going to be like a pitching coach to those younger guys. You know, he's going to be a mentor, somebody that's been there, that's had the success. He knows what it takes to be successful. It's somebody that the Phillies could have used and kind of just let go to the Braves. And I'm not saying that's something they did wrong on their part, but it's more of like the impact that he would have had on the team. Not to mention like what you said, like him not being on the Mariners. Like we've seen pitchers go from, you know, a dwindling team onto a winning team halfway through the season and all of a sudden turn into a Cy Young candidate. So who's to know what Felix Hernandez could have ended up helping the Braves this season, even as a veteran who's kind of dropped off in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I guess this year won't be the year that we find out about that. But that's a good point, though. That's a good point that you bring up about what he could have done to some of the younger pitchers. They do have a good young rotation there in Atlanta, and he could help them out a lot. So I guess we won't find out there. But my guy, who I think is going to be missed the most by his team, and he's kind of the same as Felix Hernandez. He's not as effective as he once was. He kind of deals with some injuries, but he still came up big for them in key situations in the postseason last year, and that's Ryan Zimmerman down in D.C. He's been with the Nationals. He was their first ever draft pick after they moved from Montreal. He's been with them since the RFK days, starting back in 2005, the year that they moved to D.C., and he's been a consistent part of that lineup ever since then. He's been such a consistent performer every single year. You can expect good numbers. You can expect a high batting average. You can expect 25 to 30 home runs. You can expect him to push, 85, 90 RBIs. And they're going to miss that this year, even though he's a guy who's getting up there. And I think I mentioned in the group chat that I'm surprised he didn't retire after winning a World Series ring. That's still going to be a big loss for them, especially after they already lost Anthony Rendon, who signed with the Angels. So that's going to be a big thing for them, and I think that could have somewhat of a negative impact on the Nationals offense this year.
It's gonna be weird not seeing him on that team, just because, like you said, the first ever draft pick by Washington and everything. So I think his, like you mentioned, it is more significant, and it was very surprising to see, knowing it might be his last year. And again, like with how often he's been with that team, it's gonna be very odd not seeing him in that lineup.
Yeah, it really will be. It'll be so strange looking at that lineup card and not seeing Zimmerman penciled in there somewhere. But this talk of the players who will not be playing this season brings us to our final topic, which is, do you guys think that we'll make it through the 60-game schedule, or do you think that coronavirus will get in the way and they'll have to call it short? And Sean, we'll start with you this time.
I'm at the point now where I don't even want to, I went through so much drama with the Players Association and the owners that the fact that they have a set 60-game schedule, in place, and, we're getting all this news that players are getting coronavirus left and right and they're shutting down some training facilities. I'm at the point now where I don't even want to picture a world where there's not going to be this 60-game shortened season. I just want to sit here and believe that there's going to be 60 games. I don't think it's going to get shut down, but there's the chance that it will because of how much cases are spiking up. I just want to believe that it's going to happen and shoot the mind out of my head. I don't want to think about there not being an MLB season this year.
I think a lot of us are in the same boat. We're in that we want to be positive about it. We want to take a look at it and just hope that it's going to be there to, give us something to do, give us something to take our minds off of what's going on, and just give us something that we're used to having. So we're all hoping that 60-game season does happen, and we're all, I think, trying to be cautiously optimistic about it. Biscuit, what about you? What are your thoughts on this?
To echo Sean, I'm hoping. I don't want to imagine a situation where it doesn't, but I also from everything that I'm seeing and what the beat reporters are writing about, with players expressing their concerns, and tests being delayed and camps getting having to shut down for a day, like what happens if we're a couple days from opening day and the Yankees and Nationals are getting ready for like their game and they all have to do like a COVID test a couple days beforehand. What if like Garrett Cole's test doesn't come back and you have to like not have him start opening day or something like that, or like he doesn't get cleared? I don't know. I just feel like this is going to pose problems like that. And with those problems, I think it could incite and open a can of worms for more problems to ensue. So I hate to go back to pessimistic Joe and not optimistic Joe, but pessimistic Joe's telling me to be cautious and to, not get my hopes too high for a full 60 game plus a postseason. This virus, and I know we kind of talked about bringing it up earlier. Scott Kingery's article today about how he detailed his COVID experience. It's really unfortunate, and it's just sad to hear. It's sad to hear about someone you idolize. It's sad to hear it if it's someone and it just concerns me, and like that these one of the I guess I don't know if stereotype is the right word, but kind of concepts is that this virus doesn't affect kind of our age group, people in their 20s who are very healthy and active, but someone as jacked and like Scott Kingery and in good health and as a professional athlete, for him to get it and be so sick, it's just concerning. It's really just concerning all around, and I have my doubts.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are concerned just like you are, and we'll get into that Scott Kingery thing in a little bit. But first, Andrew, what's your take on the situation? Do you think we get through the season?
I hate to be pessimistic as well, but I'm going to have to go with no on this one. And there's several reasons. First, we're already seeing issues in testing. I know the MLB blamed it on the holiday weekend, which I get to an extent. But their exact quote was, "We've addressed the delays caused by the holiday weekend and do not expect a reoccurrence. We commend the affected clubs who responded properly by canceling their workouts," end quote. And again, I get it to an extent, but then you look around other sports, and I know it's not a huge league, but I've just been watching a lot of it because it's live basketball, and that's the basketball tournament going on right now. And they had no issues with the holiday weekend. They started their league on a holiday. They had the appropriate amount of testing. They actually kicked out a team because of the results they got back, and I think there was 2 or 3 on that team that got the virus, so they kicked out the entire team. So when I see other leagues doing the right way of testing and getting the results back, I don't see how you can kind of blame it on that. And then you get the issue with Adam Hazley, where I don't know if they lost his test or what happened with the mix-up there, but the Phillies get their test back. Adam Hazley, his result isn't in there, so he has to miss the first week of workouts before he was able to join the team today. So that's another issue in testing besides the holiday. So I think along with some of the other issues, we're already having issues in testing, and that's before the season starts. And as you mentioned, Biscuit, like what happens like right before a game when someone doesn't get a test, or multiple guys on the team doesn't get a testing, and then you got to cancel multiple games. So I think that's an issue. I think even though right now David Price is the biggest name, I do expect more guys to opt out, and as more people opt out, I think it's going to become interesting on how many people follow and to the degree on how many players opt out, which is also another issue. And then I think the way we kind of see some of these other sports going about it, and tomorrow there's a big announcement from the Ivy League, whether they're going to cancel their fall sports and move it to the spring. And I think if that does happen, you're going to kind of see some of these leagues follow. And I know it's kind of different college to pro, but when you see kind of those big-time colleges who are relying on that money to kind of stay and keep those sports, and they're moving from fall to spring, I think you're going to start seeing some of these leagues follow it as well. And you have NFL players mentioning they want at least the preseason canceled for football, which goes into August. So if if the NFL starts canceling stuff, I think it's just going to come a whole domino effect. So I am worried about the overall baseball season.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about that basketball league, that they handled it the right way. They kicked out the one team that had the positive tests, and they went about their business. So it can be done if the testing is done the right way. The question is, will baseball do it the right way? And with the amount of positive tests that they've had just in the last few days, and, things kind of spiking right before, teams, or right as teams are starting to report to their abbreviated spring trainings here. I don't know how to feel about it. Part of me thinks that it's just a thing where they're going to get positive tests now and somehow it'll subside by the time the season starts and they'll be able to go through with it, and somehow they'll avoid having it be an issue throughout the 60 games in the playoffs. But at the same time, this thing is just it's so unpredictable. I really don't know how to feel about it. I guess I would say my personal confidence level is at maybe like 60% that they'll get the season done. So I think that they will, but I can't fully commit to saying that I'm 100% confident they'll get through it. I think that they will. I'm hopeful that they will, but there's also a very good chance that they won't. And I think that a lot of baseball fans need to be prepared for that reality, that there very well may be a point where they just call it off in the middle of the season. Let's hope that that's not the case, though. But you guys brought up the Scott Kingery thing, and you brought up the Adam Hazley thing, and we'll get into the Kingery thing a little bit right now. Kingery, who is 26 years old, by the way, mentioned that after he tested positive for coronavirus, he said that he got chills so bad that he couldn't move without his whole body shaking. And he said that his fever spiked so high that he sweated through his sheets in his bed and left an imprint of his body. So that's I would say that while it's not bad enough that he had to even go to a hospital, it's not bad enough that he came close to death. That's probably on the more severe end of the symptoms, but it's something to definitely take into consideration that this is a serious thing, and it can affect younger people who are around our age. We're all in our 20s, and while we might have a much, much higher chance of surviving it, it's still a very real thing for us. And Andrew, we'll start with you this time. What's your take on the whole Kingery thing, that the symptoms that he mentioned having?
I think it's really alarming, and I think as we hear often that, the younger people should be fine and they'll be able to fight through it. But when you kind of read that and you see the significance it had on his body, and we know, and I think you mentioned you say he's 26, is that correct?
He is, yes.
So we read that kind of stuff, and he was able to fight through it. But then you think about it, Scott Kingery is in fantastic shape. He's out there in professional sports shape, doing what he has to do to kind of work out and stuff like that. And, that's 3 years older than me, so like you mentioned, we're all along the same age. And for me, who I'm not in good shape at all, and, my body's not going to be fight it as well as him, I feel like. So it's like, for those who aren't as good of shape as some of these professional players, how's it going to affect them? And the other thing is, for those who do have some kind of illness or sickness or whatever, it's going to affect them in that other way. So I think, and that's what makes this whole thing scary in itself, again, is there's so much to take away from it. And it's just so alarming to look at. It's, in a way, in a lot of ways, I know he's good that he was able to fight through it, but it is also sad to read, to see how much it is affecting him. And it's interesting to see how it's going to affect some of the other players. We mentioned Mike Trout is still thinking about what he wants to do, because he's expecting to have his first kid soon. Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler also are going to have kids soon. And it's going to be interesting to see how much they talk to Scott Kingery, and if Kingery really opens up more, I'm sure, with the team behind the scenes, and he kind of tells those guys, it is serious, it is that serious, you got to be careful with that. And these guys who do not, who don't want to affect their wife or their newborn, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays on them as well, and kind of how it affects their decision down the road as well. So I think this is very eye-opening after reading that, and you've seen some other players do the same thing. So I think it is something to really take a look at, and a lot of these guys probably will.
Yeah, it's a really good point about the guys who are expecting to become fathers pretty soon. They might take something away from this situation with Kingery, and it might affect their decision on whether or not they want to play it this year. So we'll see how that plays out. Sean, what's your thought on this whole thing?
Well, I've heard stories of how it affects people that, aren't in the danger zone of how deeply it'll affect your health. And I've heard that it can even, some of these younger people that think they're asymptomatic or like I am, like I have all this confidence that I can go out and do whatever. And even if I get it, it's not going to appear and I'll just stay away from people kind of thing. Like that's not the right, ideals to have. That's not the way you should be looking at this. And I think this is a perfect example. This is his way of getting it into everybody's head that they should be a lot more careful than they already are. And he's really doing it on a platform, like a good platform. He's doing it in a way that he should be. He's doing it so that people can be more cautious going into this season. Players specifically, that'll give them a different viewpoint and say, maybe we should be more careful than just thinking, I can go into this thinking I'll survive anything. It's not that simple. It's not like you're invincible. There's a lot that could happen to you. There's a lot that could affect the entire team. And I think that's his goal with this, is just to keep people on their toes.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, and hopefully the platform they use is able to get through to at least some of the younger fans, people around our age, and open their eyes to it. Biscuit, how do you feel about this?
Like I said earlier when I first brought up the topic, it's hard to read. It's sad. You don't want to see that happen to anyone, let alone, an athlete who you're a fan of. But you're right. I think what he's saying, hopefully with the message and everything, it reaches audiences that may have not have been wearing masks or practicing social distancing, and they really get their eyes open to everything, and they're just kind of like okay, this is serious. This is affecting young people. I'm not invincible. And I think, that's something that happens, and it kind of in a way reminds me of like when Kobe Bryant died and passed away, I should say, and how you look at someone and they're so invincible, and no one can escape death in the ending, and it just kind of, those kinds of situations just make you kind of examine your own mortality. And I think something like this does the same thing. You see someone get sick, you hear people who, whether they just have a fever or someone who's placed on a ventilator, like you really think to yourself, like, Jesus, like no one's safe. And I think that's really what I got out of reading that. And I think it's going to spur people to have second thoughts. I think it's going to give people more doubts. It's not, a feel-good story, and it certainly, is frightening to hear just how bad it could be for someone who is even in good health. Like, for someone who's in good health to have sweats where you're sweating through your sheets and chills that are, uncontrollable, and you can't even move your body without just shaking. It's hard to hear, and it just really makes me want to, continue to do what I've been doing and practicing, safe social distancing, continuing to wear my mask, and just continue to take care of my health in general.
Yeah, and that's...
I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I just want to add something on that real quick. And you mentioned it, Biscuit, that some people aren't taking it serious and everything, and that's one thing. And I know it's hard to kind of get out there because this was a Philly page that wrote it, so it'll be interesting to see how much it kind of does get out there. But like, I want to know, like, what does it take to get some of these people to take it more serious? And I'm not saying don't go out at all, because obviously at some point we kind of all do got to start getting back to some things. But like, I don't know how much of the news you guys read, but I read an article that was sent to me from a good friend, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, there's several people throwing college parties right now. They're having a contest to see who can get the virus first. And like, when you read stuff like that, and then you read what happened to Kingery or some of these other athletes, it's like, what does it take to put some sense into some of these guys? And like, again, I'm not saying don't go out or anything like that, but I'm saying, like, you don't have you don't have parties to see who can get the virus first. Like, I don't, like, that just seems idiotic to me. Like, I don't get how people can like think that way. And like, that's why I kind of hope when you see some of these athletes kind of open up and speak out on this kind of stuff, like, it can kind of put some sense into some people, and it can start to change some things. Because if we keep having people doing that kind of stuff like that's going on in Alabama, we're never gonna. It's gonna be a while to get back to where we want to be.
Yeah, I didn't even hear about that, but stuff like that, it makes me lose faith in society a little bit. Man, that's not smart to be doing something like that. And I've been I don't know. I've been a little bit outspoken about it. I mean, I do believe that this virus is a real thing, and I've taken my precautions. You know, when I'm out in public, I have my mask on. I don't like the mask. Don't get me wrong. I hate having the mask, but I realize that it's something that it's going to need to happen until it's safe to not have it anymore. And so I take my precautions when I'm out in public. I have the mask on. I've had people over my house and we haven't had masks on, but we've done a good job of keeping our distance from each other and not interacting, or getting too close to each other or any of that kind of thing. And it all comes down to being responsible about it and making, reasonable, rational decisions in terms of, staying safe and erring on the side of caution, even if you don't think you can get it, even if you think because you're young it won't have a great effect on you, you still need to err on the side of caution because you never know. Some people could get it and have no effects, be asymptomatic. Other people our age could get it and they could end up on the ECMO machine in a hospital bed or even worse. So regardless of what you think about it, regardless of how scared or not scared you are of it, it makes more sense to err on the side of caution here.
No, I completely agree with you. I think, again, it's something that has to be taken note from, everyone. And I think it's not going to continue. It's not going to get better until everyone takes it as serious as it needs to be. We look at it like where we all did start taking it serious, and everyone seemed like they were taking it more, and everything started to go down, and it seemed like people lost patience, and now we start to see all these spikes again, especially in like Texas and everything, and now that some states are kind of reclosing a little bit too. So I think those numbers kind of show it as well, as like it's important to just take it serious. And like I know it's tough because no one wants to wear a mask, but if we just kind of wear a mask this next like month or two, it should really help get back to some type of normalcy eventually.
Yeah, I'll admit I was one of the ones who off the bat I was like, hey, don't tell me what to do, don't tell me to wear a mask and all that kind of stuff. And to an extent, I'm always going to be like that when it comes to the government. I don't like the government telling me what to do, but I think everybody as a whole, without the government urging them, should be able to make this rational decision that it's better off to wear a mask when you're out in public. And this way we'll, hopefully be able to get over this thing quicker. And the quicker we get through this, the sooner that people won't be asking us to wear masks everywhere. So that's kind of the point of view that I've taken on this whole thing over the past few weeks. All right, so you guys got anything else that you want to throw in here before we wrap the show up?
I just say finally got a schedule and looking forward to hopefully getting back out there and watching these the Phillies play. And we got what is it, about 17 days till opening day?
That is correct. Yep, today's the 7th and the opening day is the 24th. 17 days, a little over 2 weeks, so just about 2.5 weeks. So we can. It seems like forever though, because so much can happen in 17 days that'll change everything. But hopefully we just fly through these 17 days and we reach the 24th. It's there. It happens. We have regular season Major League Baseball to watch. Sean or Biscuit, you guys got anything?
All I have to say is, considering the season happens, I can't wait for Toronto's young core to dominate the Phillies for a 10th of their regular season games.
Oh man, let's hope that doesn't happen, but it probably will. I could just see bases loaded, Neris on the mound, bottom of the 9th, ending up in Toronto. Vladdy Jr. stepping to the plate and cranking a walk-off slam about 520 feet into the third deck up there.
Oh God.
Right off the Harry the Case.
Oh God.
Oh man. All right, you guys got anything else?
My final thought for the night. I am speaking to you, Matthew Klentak. Sign JT, extend him, pay up, overpay if we need to. Don't let him go to the Mets. Get it done. And
Get her done. All right. Well, That's another thing we can all agree with. Definitely get JT that money that he deserves because I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to see him playing for another team.
Absolutely
That
not.
would've-
I would not be happy.
If he went to a team like the Athletics, I think it'd be okay.
Nah.
Any team that's not the freaking Phillies, man, it's not good. And
Fuck that noise. Sign him.
guess what? Guess what? The rumor mill has been swirling that if he doesn't end up with the Phillies, Biscuit's favorite team, the New York Mets, are a front runner to land him. So
Oh,
we don't want Biscuit to go into that tirade of when he signs with the Mets. So
You know, the Mets are like Lord Voldemort. Like, I don't want you to even say his name. I just, oh gosh. I just get this mental image of JT Realmuto and Mr. Met just hanging out, and oh gosh. Don't let it happen. You know, we live in dark times already. Like, pay JT.
you heard the man, Clentac. You heard him. You heard Biscuit. He said pay JT. That means you got to pay JT. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out first off to the band that's responsible for our intro and outro music. They do such a spectacular job. They're called the Jackdaws. You can find them online at www.thejackdaws.com. They also have a Patreon account, which you can find at www.patreon.com/thejackdaws. You can find their music on any streaming service. It's Celtic rock. If you enjoy that kind of music, they're a very, very good band. Even if you don't enjoy it, give them a listen. They might change your opinion on the genre as a whole. They're that good. Once again, www.thejackdaws.com or patreon.com/thejackdaws. That is the Jackdaws, the band responsible for our intro and outro music. And I also want to give a shout out to Just Food. They're located in Buckingham Green, Buckingham, Pennsylvania. That is off of York Road. Their owner, Rob, a great friend of the podcast. If you go in, tell him the Chasing the Pennant podcast sent you. He's a great guy. Once again, a good friend of the podcast. You can reach them by phone at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. Once again, Just Food, located in Buckingham Green off of York Road in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Chasing the Pennant podcast, and we'll be back with another one in just a few short days.
Man, I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.